Welcome to The Pilot Life, the show where we sit down with people who are passionate about aviation. My name is Brendan. I've been a commercial airline pilot for over 20 years, and in that time, I've heard some incredible stories. This is the show that I share those with you. Welcome on board. So welcome to The Pilot Life.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here. This is the first episode of The Pilot Life. My name is Brendan. I'm a 737 pilot. And, kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show is because a lot of the people who we fly with, interested in aviation, have a passion for aviation, but then everyone also has like a really interesting story too. And I wanted episode 1 to feature someone who I know has an interesting story, but also has a very personal connection to me. We both started at the airlines at the same time. We started our airline journey together, and that is none other than Kieran Geehan. Kieran, welcome to The Pilot Life.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Happy to have you here for episode 1.
Thank you.
So we met
2003.
2000. We just passed our 20th anniversary.
Yep.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary to you.
October 20th, 2003 was our first class date, right?
October 13th.
Oh, was it?
2003.
It was. Okay.
And we interviewed on the same day too.
We did?
We did.
Wow.
Yep.
I had totally forgotten that.
Yep. You and I and Rich and a couple
yeah.
of people all interviewed on the same day.
What a blur. Well, let's start with kind of how pilots usually start, which is how long have you been flying? How much time do you have? What kind of airplanes have you flown? Just to kind of give our audience of your experience level.
Okay, so I started flying when I was about 18. We had just moved from France to the U.S., and I was actually supposed to go to college in Scotland. My father got transferred over here with his job, and I came over here to help them move in for the summer and decided that I was having just a little bit too much fun. I decided that I was going to stick around. Got my private pilot's license in a month, and I was going twice a day, every day, just trying to knock it out as fast as possible. And then ended up going to Embry-Riddle up in Prescott, Arizona, where I did my 4-year degree in aeronautics, aeronautical science to be exact, and then started flight instructing, flew a little corporate, then got into the airlines at 2003, October 2003.
I want to back up a bit there because we started at you were 18. I want to go back because your accent, people may hear your accent, and that's not an Oregonian accent or a Washingtonian accent.
It's not. It's a little bit of international mutt of mystery is what I call it.
Okay.
So I was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland. When I was 4 years old, we moved to Scotland for my dad's job. And then when I was 8 years old, we moved to Paris, France until I was 18. And then the story starts there.
Wow. So what was the scene like in Belfast back when you were born?
It was rough. Belfast in the 70s was a pretty interesting place. A lot of violence, a lot of crime, a lot of violence, a lot of upset people, politics, right, religion, all combined into one.
Yeah.
It was kind of a mess. I was kind of lucky that I was able to make it out at such a young age.
Yeah. When did the thought of flying first enter your brain? Was it in those early years?
My parents took me to my first air show when I was about 3.5, 4 years old. And we were out. I got to see the Red Arrows perform, which is the British version of the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels.
Right.
And as I said, I was about 4 years old, and I wandered away at age 4. And my parents found me a couple of hours later at the Royal Air Force booth. And the recruiter had given me an application for the Royal Air Force and told me to come back when I was old enough and he would see what he could do about getting me into an airplane.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's where I first developed my passion for aviation.
Yeah.
But fast forward a couple of years, we were living in Scotland and moving to Paris, and I got to go up to the flight deck of a 757 on British Airways in flight. Back in the days when we didn't have all the high security and we could actually go up to the flight deck and talk to the captain in flight.
Yeah, crews would just fly with the door open.
Door open, yeah. So I remember asking the flight attendant, the lead flight attendant, if it was okay to be able to go up to the flight deck, and she went up and talked to the captain and then came back and said, yep. So my brother and I went up to the flight deck and we got to sit up there, talking with the captain, and I was just mesmerized. All these buttons, all these screens. I had no idea what I was looking at, but I thought it was pretty darn cool.
That's incredible.
So we were en route between Scotland and Paris, and the captain was asking me, so I hear you're interested in being a pilot, and I said yes. And he asked me a couple of questions, and he's like, well, how about this? How about you go back and talk to your parents and see if it's okay for you guys to ride up front here for landing.
This was on the same flight?
This was on the same flight.
Wow.
So I went back and talked to my parents. They said it was okay. So my brother and I got strapped into the jump seats of a 757 going into Paris Charles de Gaulle at night.
Yeah, and so the jump seats there's on the 757, there's 2 of them, right?
That's correct.
There's 2 extra seats up front in addition to the pilot seats.
That's correct.
Usually for like crew members who are going back and forth or whatnot, but
yeah, deadheading crew members or observation flights or whatever.
Or for young kids
kids that want to become pilots.
I can imagine. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you were up front for your landing in Paris?
Yep, up front for our landing into Paris Charles de Gaulle.
Wow.
Yep. When it comes full circle, when we start talking about the 787, my very first flight on the 787 was into Paris Charles de Gaulle at night.
Circle,
so
right?
It was just full circle. It was a pretty cool story.
That's incredible. So you're over in Paris until you're 18.
That's right.
And you didn't do any flight training at all during that time? It was
No, my house, especially our last house in Paris, was outside in the countryside. It was about 15, 20 minutes away from Versailles. And it was a 3-story house, and I had the rooftop, and I had this big sunlight window that I could see an airfield about 10 miles off in the distance. And I'd watch airplanes just flying around. And I'd sit there with aviation books, and I'd be trying to work out what they were doing. And I'd be reading about it, but never actually took any flight lessons at that point. It wasn't until I got to the U.S. that I started flight training.
So where did you guys move to then when you came over when you were 18?
So we moved to Houston initially. And as I said, I was supposed to go to Scotland, to Edinburgh University, and all my stuff is being sent from Paris to Scotland. But I came over to help my parents move in for the summer, and we decided that it was probably best that I stuck around and found a college in the U.S. instead of going all the way back to Scotland.
What was it that brought your parents over?
Oil industry.
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah, my dad was in the oil industry.
Okay. So you get into Houston, you're 18, your parents tell you maybe you're not going to go to Scotland, you're going to stay here.
Correct.
And what's the school choice there?
So I went to, my brother, who is a couple of years younger than me, was going to the international school in Houston, and they had a career fair going on, or not so much a career fair, but the college day. Mm-hmm. So they had all these colleges in, trying to attract students, and I went in. I got invited in by my brother to go and attend this little meeting from Embry-Riddle. And I just fell in love with the idea of going to Embry-Riddle, loved the flight program, loved the just their story.
Yeah.
And started putting in my stuff. So it took a couple of months for me to get everything converted over from the international into the U.S. standards before I could actually be a student at Embry-Riddle. So I ended up starting in the spring semester versus in the fall semester like everybody else.
And this was back like in the mid to late 1990s?
That was 90... Ooh, good question. 94, I guess it would have been.
Yeah, way back in the 1900s, huh?
Exactly. Wow.
And Embry-Riddle is like it's probably the premier aviation school in this country, I would say.
I would say so.
Yeah.
There's some debate.
UND, obviously. So there's a couple of big name schools. These are schools that are geared towards putting out engineers, aviation engineers, pilots. I mean, it's a very intensive, very
technical schools for the most part.
Yeah. So you apply, you get everything going, and you're moving to Prescott, Arizona.
That's correct.
It's a beautiful town.
It is a great town.
It's amazing there, right? Beam, not Flagstaff. What's
Sedona. Just a little bit south of Sedona, in between Phoenix and Sedona.
Yeah.
So it was high altitude. It was desert. It was really cold in the wintertime, really hot in the summertime, but it was great weather for flying pretty much all year round.
Yeah.
We used to have to go hunting for clouds to be able to get any kind of instrument conditions.
Yeah, usually the clouds in Arizona are the ones that you don't want to fly into.
That's exactly right.
I remember meeting some people down there because I was also down there. They would have 3,000 or 4,000 hours with like 0.2 of IMC actual flying in the clouds, just because it just isn't safe to get. Either there's ice in the clouds or it's just thunderstorms.
Yeah.
So did you do flying in Houston before you went to Arizona?
Yeah. So I did my So I did my very first. I got my private pilot's license before I went to Embry-Riddle.
Gotcha. Okay, so you came into Embry-Riddle, and they probably have you take a course to.
They did. It was like a 101 course to be able to kind of verify that you could actually fly an airplane.
Yeah.
And a kind of like a refresher course.
Yeah. So tell me about that first flight alone, your first solo.
It was interesting. I mean, it's exciting, but terrifying all at the same time. I mean, you know that you've gone through the training, you know that you've been around in the pattern several times and you've done touch and goes and you've landed and everything's been safe and, but that very first time when the instructor gets out of the airplane and that airplane starts rolling down the runway and you pull back and you're like, well, this is it. Takeoffs are optional, landings are mandatory. I got to make this land somewhere.
Yeah.
So went around the pattern, did a couple of touch and goes, and then brought it back in and full stop landing, and everything went really well.
Was that in a Cessna?
It was in a Cessna 152.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot
way
of
too
us
much
have
time. Way too much time in Cessna 152s.
That's pretty good. Okay, so you're at Embry-Riddle, and it's a 4-year aviation degree. So you said you got your bachelor's in.
I got my bachelor's in aeronautical science.
Okay, and then did you also get your CFI ratings and all that to be able to?
I did. So I got my CFI, CFII,
Yeah.
and then went and found a job outside of Prescott.
Okay.
Then got my MEI. And MEWI.
Which is your multi-engine instructor.
Correct.
Okay.
At that time.
So you got all your instructor ratings, and then you get hired where?
So I started flight instructing in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Nice area.
It was, and it was a great little flight school, CRM, Airline Training Center, ATC.
Okay.
And we had a lot of military students that would come through. So as a flight instructor, I got into the program where we were doing the military to civilian conversion for the ATP. So we'd have military pilots come in on the weekends, and I'd take them out in the twin and fly around and run them through the profiles and get them ready for their oral and their test, and then sign them off at the end of it. And it was a little multi-engine factory, a little ATP factory.
Okay.
We were running so many pilots through on a weekend, but then I had my regular students throughout the regular week.
Yeah. Do you remember your first paycheck when you got paid to actually fly?
Yeah. It was very small. It was probably about that size.
Right. Yeah.
It was pretty scary.
It was small, but then isn't that incredible though? Like you go from having to pay someone to go and fly their airplanes to suddenly they're going to pay you.
They are going to pay you. Yes.
Go out and do it.
This is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are working down in Scottsdale.
Yes.
And pumping out pilots.
Building
up your own flight time too.
That's correct. Yeah. And then one of my flight students at the time was friends with a guy who ran a corporate flight department at the Scottsdale airport. So he and I met up, and I ended up doing a little bit of flying with him in a Falcon 20. I did a little bit of time in a citation also through the company I was working with. And then 9/11 hit, and everything kind of changed, and I was back to just purely flight instructing and trying to get on at the airlines that nobody was hiring.
Yeah, it kind of shut everything down, didn't it?
Yeah.
Do you remember at the time, first of all, I want to say what you just mentioned there about one of your students knew someone who got you that job. That's a common thread I think that you're going to hear throughout is...
Absolutely. It's networking.
Yes.
Never, ever burn a bridge in aviation, because you're going to run into that person somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
For sure.
And like, you just never know. Like, I know if I knew a pilot who I vouched for, and then I came to you and said, hey, Kieran, this guy really wants to go to the airline that you're at, I could put you guys in touch.
That's it.
And then that would form that bond there.
That's it.
And
Exactly.
It's so big.
I wouldn't have had to have flown with them if somebody that I know and has flown with them trusts them to the point to be able to recommend them. Then absolutely, yeah. It's that goes a long way in aviation.
Right. So in 2001, before September 11th, airlines were hiring like crazy. 250 hours total time. 50 hours in multi. That was the target, right?
Yep.
And as soon as you had that, you could get on with pretty much any of the regional carriers out there.
That's correct.
Right? And then September 11th happens. Terrible day. And especially in the aviation industry, we're so dependent on not only the economy, but the security atmosphere. And
Correct.
I mean, it changed everything radically.
Very much so.
Right? So the jobs out there went to nothing.
To absolute zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Furloughs, pilots were on the street.
Correct. Yeah. Even corporate worlds, because you had airline pilots with a lot more experience that were on the street, they were also looking for corporate jobs. And I was more contract flying corporate than anything else. So these guys with a lot more experience than me were coming in and being able to get the jobs before me.
Yeah. Okay. So how does your journey then go to your first airline job in 2003?
So as I flight instructed for about 4 years, pretty close for, and then made a transition, moved from Scottsdale to Durango, Colorado, and was flying for Mesa Pilot Development out of Farmington, New Mexico.
Okay.
But had yet again a connection through college, and this captain that I used to know. She was a manager at Embry-Riddle, one of the flight managers. She recommended me to Horizon Air, and then I got the call for the interview, and that's where you and I met that day.
That's right. I don't remember that. I think I was probably up in my own head about Tell me about the interview process. So how much time did you have when you...
Oh, that's a good question.
When you got hired there?
That is a good question. I want to say I had 3,000 hours.
Yeah.
Pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere in around there.
And Horizon was one of the most competitive jobs out there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They were the highest paying regional carrier at
exactly.
them and Comair, but Comair had just gone out of business, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Horizon had a incredible reputation, great equipment. You know, they were flying around. All their airplanes had heads-up guidance systems in there, and I thought that was just the bomb. That was just great.
Do you remember the sim ride?
I do remember
my
the sim
gosh.
ride. Yeah. And
It was in a fixed base Frasca.
it was a Frasca 142.
42.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually messed that up.
Did you?
Yeah. We did an NDB approach into NDB holding, and then we were cleared back in to be able to shoot the approach. But on the missed approach, I don't remember if it was a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn, but I turned the wrong direction. And the second I started rolling in the wrong direction, it clicked that I had turned the wrong direction. So I keyed the microphone and fessed up to what I had done and said, Portland approach, this is Frasca 142, executing the missed approach off a runway 28 left, turned the wrong direction, going to continue my right-hand turn to this heading and then re-intercept the course outbound. So did exactly that and headed out, and I thought I was done for. I really did. I thought I was done for. The instructor paused the sim and said, everything's good, just clear your head.
Yeah.
We're going to continue with this. We got one more approach and you're good to go.
Oh.
So he re-engaged the sim, brought it back around. I shot the ILS approach down to landing and landed, and I thought I was done. I thought I'd done really well on everything else, but I'm like, that's it. There's no way they're going to hire me by turning the wrong direction on a missed approach, which is a basic mistake.
Right.
But I got into the post-interview review, and they said to me, so how do you think you did? And I said, well, I wasn't happy. I turned the wrong direction on the missed approach, and I did what I could to be able to salvage it. And, out of a scale of 1 to 10, I think I was probably a 6. And the chief pilot said, well, that's interesting that you would see it that way. We saw it as a lot higher. Your instructor was very impressed with the way that you fessed up to it right away, and you continued the turn. You told them exactly what you were doing and proceeded outbound the way you were supposed to.
Yeah.
And you fessed up to it. So we really appreciate that. So then they offered me the job.
And that's what you would do now anyways.
That's it.
Whether you're in a 787 or in a Frasca 142, is if you mess up.
If you mess up, you fess up.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. It's one of the biggest things, one of the biggest lessons I think I learned. I mean, obviously that's the right thing to do, but in an interview situation, it's a little bit more challenging, because you're under observation by an instructor. You're trying to get hired. You want to further your career. You want to better your life. And something so simple could be so costly to your career, but ended up just by doing the right thing and fessing up, it actually turned out very well.
What plane then did you get hired into?
At Horizon,
Yeah.
I got hired into the CRJ 700.
So they were flying the Q400s.
They were flying
the Q200 still.
Yep, the Dash 8 200s,
Yeah.
the Q400s, and the CRJ
That's
700.
right. Yeah.
And then based out in Denver.
Which was good for you, right? Because
It was great.
Yeah.
It was a one-leg commute from Durango to Denver.
Right. Tell me about those early days flying the CRJ. Was it similar to flying like the Falcon, or was it?
It was very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was professional. It was a great environment. Everybody was super laid back and friendly. All the captains were outgoing, energetic, excited to be there, and willing to impart information on you whenever you needed it.
It was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
It was a lot of fun.
So we were actually roommates there. We got apart. Remember in the first week, it was or maybe like in the first month of being at that apartment, I came out in the morning with my keys to my car, and I was like, "Where's my Honda Civic?" I had gotten some like Honda Civic SI like sports. I bought all of my money on this Honda Civic. And I went out there, it was gone. And then I got a call from the Denver police about 3 days later. "Hey, we found your car." I'm like, "You did?" Like, I wouldn't be so excited that we found it. They found it on this side of the interstate.
Oh my goodness.
The steering wheel's gone. All the seats were gone. Doors gone. I mean, just a completely, hatchet job. They went out there and just butchered it anyway. It was fun. It was a good time. So you're out in Denver, and the base eventually closed out there.
They did. It was a 12-year program that lasted for 4 years.
Yeah. So there was some kind of out with Frontier, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were doing all the Frontier Jet Express flying. We were doing all the regional flying for Frontier Airlines.
Yeah.
Doing all their smaller cities.
And so those business deals are generally, they would pay her, or Horizon would charge a certain amount to operate those flights being flown under the Frontier colors.
Correct.
With Horizon airplanes.
With Horizon airplanes
pilots.
and Horizon crews and flight attendants. Yeah.
Frontier decided to cancel that. So anyway, as a pilot, you kind of go where the planes are being sent, yeah?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep. So we closed up shop in Denver, and a couple of life changes occurred at that time, and I ended up moving to Portland.
Yeah. So you're in Portland. How long was upgrade for you? I can't even say that with a straight face.
I don't. Yeah, exactly.
It just is. Okay, so how long was upgrade for you?
10 years.
Yeah, it was 10 years.
Yeah, almost 10 and a half years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember getting the call. I got a call on Christmas morning.
Really?
I got a call on Christmas morning offering me upgrade.
Wow.
Yeah. It was quite the Christmas present because it had been long awaited.
Yeah. Were you already on the Q400?
I was,
okay.
Yes. They had to break my fingers to get my hands off of the yoke on the CRJ 700, and then I started class after, I think I was on the RJ for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And then started on the Q400.
Yeah. And people may say, well, why did it take you so long? Well, if you think about what happened in 2008,
Exactly.
it just, we were back to furloughing again, laying off. So there's all these huge moments that we've been through in our, 20 years here, right? September 11th, 2008, right? It just kind of sets everything back.
Exactly. All the major airlines were furloughing. They weren't hiring.
Yeah.
Horizon was also kind of unique because nobody really wanted to move on from Horizon anyway. It was a small company, a close-knit family, and everyone that got hired there really enjoyed staying there. They lived locally and they enjoyed driving to work versus jumping on an airplane and commuting clear across the country to be able to start your trips. So that was one of the big things with Horizon. Nobody moved on.
Yeah. So you get the call to upgrade. It's kind of nice to get over to the other seat.
It was very nice.
Yeah, I bet.
It was very nice.
So when
intimidating, but very nice.
Was it?
Yeah, it just the responsibility. You know that you're in charge of the airplane, and you've still got another crew member there to be able to give you input, but the final word comes down to you.
So then when did you start looking at moving on from Horizon?
Before I upgraded to captain, I started looking into flying corporate. I wanted to get out of the airline industries. It just didn't seem like it was going anywhere with everything that we just mentioned, all the stoppages in hiring. It just didn't seem like it was a viable solution anymore. So I started looking into corporate flying and applied at a couple of jobs down in Texas. Ended up teaching CRM and threat and air management for a couple of corporate flight departments out of Texas. Got offered jobs to fly their Gulfstreams, but it just didn't pan out quite the way I had wanted it to. It was delay after delay, and you're getting hired, you're not getting hired, and it just never really progressed the way I thought it was in my mind.
Yeah,
the way it was going to go.
Do you think if they had offered you a job that you would have left?
Absolutely. At that time, absolutely. Yeah.
It was some dark days.
It was some very dark days. It was some very challenging times.
Yeah.
Yeah. That we call it the lost decade, because what it really was, it felt like you had lost 10 years of your life with no prospect, no career advancement, no even real hope of anything getting better. Mm-hmm. It did.
Yeah.
Hindsight's 2020, but it definitely got better.
It's funny though how life is like that sometimes, where your life could have gone in an entirely different direction had you gotten hired by that corporate job.
Oh, absolutely. It worked out. It worked out the way it was supposed to work out.
Yeah.
I got the call from United.
So how did you get that call? Because it still is a very competitive job. But back then, it was super competitive.
It was. So the way I got my interview was through what's called a meet and greet. And it's a program that United's been running for quite some time now. So you have a referral from inside the company, and they refer you to the chief pilot's office. And the chief pilot brings you in, and they basically pre-interview you and run you through the entire interview, the HR portion of it, and maybe a couple of little technical things in there too. And they'll ask you some questions, and then if they like you and they have a good rapport with you, then they end up writing you a letter of recommendation. Then your file gets taken and put into the short stack for the interview. So I flew down to San Francisco and had my meet and greet, and it went very, very well. It was actually pretty funny.
Now, wasn't the chief pilot down there? Wasn't he from Ireland too?
He was. Yes. So I walk into his office,
Yeah.
and he's being very professional and polite, and he's like, this is, make yourself at home, make yourself comfortable, take your coat off, and take a seat, and can I get you anything? You want any coffee or anything? I'm like, no, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And he's like, Kieran, is that an Irish name? I'm like, yes, sir, it sure is. And he takes my application and he throws it across the room. He's like, we're done. I'm like, oh, okay. Are we done good? Are we done bad? He's like, oh, we're done good. He's like, you lucked out. You've got the only Irish pilot in this chief pilot's office and interviewing you today. And he's like, I don't care what you say from this point on. I'm going to write you a letter of recommendation. So that was his icebreaker. Yeah. And of course, I laughed and we laughed. And he's like, but you know what? You flew all the way down here to be able to do this meet and greet, so I may as well go ahead and ask you the questions. So he did. He went through and talked me through the questions, and I would give him my responses. He's like, oh, that's really great. That's a great answer. Phrase it like this. This is what they want to hear. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's wonderful. Thanks. Yeah.
Nice. So you get called for the interview.
I get called for the interview. Fly over.
What was your like nerve level going out there?
Very high.
Was it? Yeah, because this is like the dream job, right?
This is the dream job for me. Yeah. So I flew out to Denver. I had done a whole bunch of airline interview preparation prior to, and basically ran through all the different types of questions I'd be asked. I even paid a good chunk of change to be able to get into the simulator, a 737 simulator. It was a 737-200, I think it was, sim. And it was a United sim. So I went into the training center and did like an hour-long session running through the exact profiles that I was going to be tested on in my interview. The interview went really very well also, so it worked out well.
And this was what? This was 2014?
This was 2014, yeah, because I got hired in January of 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hired onto what plane?
Onto the Airbus 320. 320, 319, 320.
Out of where?
Initially, I was based in Houston.
Okay.
For about a month. But I had a transfer into San Francisco and then transferred after a month in Houston, transferred into San Francisco.
So you're at United, you're on the Airbus, FO, first officer there.
Correct.
And an opening comes up on the 787. Is that how that works?
That's correct. Yeah. So the airline was kind of in a little bit of a shuffle at the time. And the 747s, the Boeing 747s were going away. One of the favorite layovers on the 747 was Hong Kong for various reasons. And a lot of the first officers that were flying the 747 didn't know whether the airplane, that city, Hong Kong, was going to go to the 777 or if it was going to the 787 whenever they closed the 747 base down.
Okay.
So there was a little bit of a lag right there where nobody was bidding the airplane. And it's normally a very, very senior airplane. So technically my seniority at 2 years with United Airlines should not have been able to hold the 787. But because of this little gap where nobody was bidding it while they were waiting for the announcement which airplane Hong Kong was going to, I kind of snuck in and got onto the airplane. So I was super, super junior on the airplane for the longest time, for probably 5 years at least. I mean, I was on reserve on the airplane for 5 years.
Yeah.
But it was so worth it.
Yeah. So tell me about flying the 787 for the first time.
Absolute dream. And I mean, that's its nickname too, right? The Dreamliner. I mean, it's exactly that. It's such an amazing piece of equipment. I mean, it's obviously the biggest airplane I've ever flown in my life. But it flies so beautifully. It's so smooth. It's so technologically advanced. It's great.
Yeah. It also gives you opportunities on your layovers to pursue your other passion, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So just so people know, you are also a professional photographer.
Correct.
Company is
Mock Photographer.
Mock Photographer. And if you're listening to this, I would encourage you to go onto YouTube and watch part of this portion, because we're going to throw several of your photos up kind of, throughout the episode. But your pictures on your layovers are just incredible.
Oh, thank you.
So
it's
it makes me want to be a 787 pilot.
It gives me an excuse to get out of bed. The 787, the international flying is very, very taxing on your body. We're going through so many time zone changes. Basically, every flight is a red eye somewhere in the world. You might start out in San Francisco in the middle of the day, but you're really flying a red-eye flight over top of Greenland as you're headed into mainland Europe. It's real easy to be able to get to the hotel and just go, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm tapping out. I'm going to bed. I'm going to sleep. I don't care. It's the middle of the day. I'm just going to sleep and, recover.
Right.
But for me, I carry all this camera equipment around with me to force me to not go and sleep. So I'll get to the hotel. I'll shower. I may take a little nap, an hour or two nap, depending upon what time of day it is. And then I'll get all my camera gear ready and I'll just go and take pictures. And I'll be out all day long taking pictures, and all night long quite often too. And it just kind of forces me to get into the local time schedule.
Yeah.
A lot of crews do the exact opposite. They will sleep all day and stay awake all night long just so they can stay on their home base time clock. But that's not for me. I have to get out and enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you're going to fly 17 and a half hours to Singapore, you may as well get out and enjoy it.
Yeah. You just instantly adjust.
I adjust. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I pay for it. Don't get me wrong. I will pay for it because it'll take me a day, at least a full day to recover on the back end of my trips. And my wife is super understanding. Whenever I come home, she understands that, I'm going to check in with her real quick, and then I'm going to go take a shower, and I'm going to jump into bed, and I'm going to sleep for at least 3 hours.
Yeah.
Get up, I feel refreshed. I can continue on with my day or with my evening. She'll let me sleep in the next morning, and then, I'm getting back into my regular schedule.
So what is like a typical monthly schedule for you?
So normally, with the lengths of trips that I'm doing, it's about 3 trips, maybe 4 trips a month. But anywhere from 15 to 18 days off a month, which is nice.
And are those generally like 3-day trips? Is that how you...
3 to 4 day trips. Okay. We do, not so much anymore, but we used to have 6-day, what we call W's, where you'll fly from, let's say, from San Francisco to London, layover in London, and then go from London to, let's say, DC, layover in DC, back to London, layover again, and then back to San Francisco.
I see.
We call those W's.
Okay. So what is like your typical trip that's going to be coming up now?
So I have 3 trips this coming month, and all 3 of them are to Auckland, New Zealand.
How long is that flight?
It's about a 14-hour flight. So it's a 4 crew member flight. We'll have 1 captain and 3 first officers. You'll have the captain and then 1 flying first officer who's paired up with the captain. So he'll get 1 of the landings, and then we have 2 what are called relief officers, IROs, International Relief Officer. Those are the 2 pilots that will sit behind in the jump seats, and we trade out in flight. So we'll take off. Let's say we're headed to Auckland. We'll take off at about midnight, and the 2 IROs or bunkies, they will head to the bunk and sleep for half the flight.
Okay.
And then the flyers, the captain and the flying first officer, will continue flying for that first half of the flight. Then halfway through, we'll switch out. The 2 bunkies or IROs will come down. They will jump into the seat. We'll give them a full briefing of where we are, fuel status, alternate status, weather, any kind of abnormalities with the airplane, any abnormalities with the passengers or the crew, anything that needs to be brought to their attention, frequency changes, any of that kind of stuff. We'll advise them of that. Then we'll head up to the bunk and sleep for the same amount of time, about half the flight.
Okay.
And then everybody has to be back on the flight deck for the last 45 minutes of the flight. So everyone comes back up again. We all brief and get ready for the approach and arrival into whatever destination we're going into.
So do you bid as either the flying pilot or the IRO? Or
you do. Yet again, it's seniority based. So however long you've been with the company depicts what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. Luckily, my seniority on the airplane nowadays is getting a lot better. So I'm able to pick up a lot more of the flyer positions versus when I was junior on the airplane, I was always a bunkie. I was always an IRO, always a relief officer.
Get up there, sit up there and cruise for several hours, and you never get to take off or land.
That's correct. Yeah, you're going to the simulator every 90 days to be able to get landings.
No way.
Yeah, FAA requirement is to have 3 landings within 90 days, and that wasn't happening. So we would always be going to the sim.
Otherwise, you and the captain alternate legs.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. We did have a couple of questions come in from you from Instagram. The first one was, what was the total time it took you to go from a 0-time pilot to a 787 pilot?
Oh, that is a very good question. I currently am sitting about 17,000 hours total time.
Yeah.
And I want to say I had at least 10,000 hours, pretty close, 10 or 11,000 hours by the time I got onto the 787.
Yeah. And so that time would vary too, obviously.
It would, yeah.
As someone who is coming in during the huge rush that we just had.
Exactly. We have new hires that have been hired onto the Boeing 777 and onto the 787, which is unheard of in our industry.
Yeah.
But we have guys that maybe have 3,000, 3,000 hours are being hired directly into the right seat of a 787.
Yeah. Another question was, do you prefer landing when it's really foggy or when it is really windy?
That's a good question.
Which one does the 787 handle better in your mind?
The 787 handles both of those absolutely beautifully.
Yeah.
We have the heads-up guidance system on both sides of the flight deck. So the captain and the flying first officer have the heads-up guidance system, which is just a remarkable piece of equipment. Love using it. I mean, I was lucky enough to be able to fly that at Horizon also, so I was used to it.
Yeah.
So flying in the fog is a lot of fun. It's a little bit of a pucker factor every once in a while, but we have full auto land capability on this airplane. So even if we didn't have the HUD, we can fully auto land to almost 0-0 on that airplane.
Do you guys do the Cat 3 approaches from both seats, or does generally just the captain do those?
We used to do them from both seats, and I don't know exactly what changed, but it's only from the left seat now.
Are you guys 400 RVR with auto land in the
Yes.
in the HUD, and then if you only have one of those, does it go up to a little bit, or
It does. It varies a little bit.
okay?
Yeah.
But 400 is your lowest.
Correct.
Last question was, how does an airplane that big fly?
Magic.
PFM, baby. PFM.
Yeah, fairy dust.
That's right. It's incredible, isn't it?
It's amazing. It's amazing when you look at something that's about 200 ton, how you can get that thing off the ground. I mean, we can eat up a lot of runway on a hot summer's day at high altitude for sure.
Well, and you watch those wings flex.
26 feet. That's how much the wingtips can flex.
Wow.
Yeah. That to me is amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
What's been your most favorite layover?
That's so challenging.
How about your most favorite layover to photograph?
Yet again, that's so...
You've got some really cool pictures. Was it Rome that you were down in that?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to do a Rome trip, a 5-day Rome trip during COVID. So we didn't have any passengers on board. We were just flying cargo back and forth between the U.S. and Europe. I had unrestricted access to pretty much all the monuments, all the tourist sites in Rome because there were no tourists and there was nobody out. I just had to wear my mask. But the first officer I was flying with, myself, were the only two people in St. Peter's Basilica for several hours that day.
Wow.
I have unrestricted views of the center of the St. Peter's Basilica with not a soul in it. It was a once-in-a-lifetime deal.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And you've got some incredible photos to prove it.
Yeah. It was it was very, very lucky, that's for sure.
So do you think you're going to stay on the 7-8 then for the rest of your flying?
I would love to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to just jump the trash can, which means going from the right seat as the first officer to a captain on the 787.
Yeah.
Current plans doesn't look like that's going to happen. It may look like I might take upgrade to domestic captain in short notice here as we plan a move to Texas.
Yeah. So possibility of upgrading soon, which would be, I imagine life on the 787 is pretty sweet.
It's very
So
very
the thought of going back to left seat on a narrow body.
Yeah, my life as a 787 pilot is I show up to the airport, go into ops, I meet the crew, we brief, we look over the flight plan, I look at the weather, we look at our alternates, we look at our fuel, talk about what we're going to do on our layover. As we're walking out to the airplane, we get to the airplane, and if I'm the flyer, then I'm jumping into the seat and I'm setting up the airplane, configuring it, ready to take off. If I'm one of the bunkies, then we're doing the pre-flight and all the inspections on the airplane and getting your bunks and everything set up. Then we all get into the flight deck. We do all our checklists. We do all our briefings. We taxi out. We take off. We fly. I go to the bed. I sleep for several hours. Come back. We land the airplane, and I go to the hotel. That's it. We do one set of checklists. One takeoff checklist, one pre-flight checklist, one after takeoff checklist, and that's it. And then we're sitting up at altitude for hours and hours and hours. Our job description is hours and hours of boredom followed by split seconds of sheer terror. Right. And then we get to the hotel, and then the camera gear comes out, we're going to go find some interesting foods, experience the culture, experience the country that we're in, and really enjoy it. On the domestic side, for me, it's a little bit different. Going to the domestic side will be a lot different, I should say, just because it's multiple legs every day.
Yeah.
It's multiple checklists, it's multiple airports, it's shorter flights. I'm not getting to go to the bunk and sleep, which is just, I don't know how I'm going to pull this off.
No. As a 737 pilot, I have no pity for you, or I have no. So you're, I would say, probably halfway, if not a little more than halfway through your aviation flying career. We've been in the airlines now for 20 years.
Yeah, 15 and a half more years to go.
Yeah. What's been your most favorite part of that?
The people that I've met along the way, the places that I've been, the things that I've gotten to see and experience, the food that I've gotten to try, the cultures I've got to experience. I mean, it's just being able to fulfill my dream is also a really big one. As a 4-year-old kid looking back, never in a million years would I have thought that I'd be flying an airplane for real. Even when I was a pilot at Horizon Airlines, I remember sitting up in Seattle and watching a 787 just taxi by, and I'd be like, wow, I can't even imagine what it'd be like to be sitting in the seat of that thing. Well, here I am.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. I'm living my dream to the fullest. Aviation has provided so many experiences. It's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Wherever you are, people dream about being where you are.
That's right.
I mean, you're in the seat that there's probably thousands of people, aviation, young, old, do anything to fly a 787.
Right. Yep.
And you get to live it.
Yep, that's exactly right. I mean, I remember as a kid looking at a Cessna 172 and saying, wow, that's massive. How could anybody fly that? And then once you start flying the Cessna 172, then you're looking at a Beech 1900 going, whoa, wow, that's a real airplane. I can't wait to fly one of those. And then you start flying something bigger, and it's like, whoa, wow, the CRJ. Oh no, an Airbus. No, a 787. Oh, a 777.
Right.
It's the grass is always greener, for sure, but it's a learning experience in each and every airplane that you get to fly.
That's right. The grass is green where you water it.
That's exactly right.
That's it. Well, thank you so much for being the first guest ever.
No, thank you. I appreciate
podcast.
it.
Tell you, this is either going to be a huge success or we're just going to do a nosedive into the ground. One of the things that you mentioned about like the people that you meet, and we've, I never could have imagined 20 years later that this is where we are. We're both kind of living our own dreams, right? And all the experiences, the people that we've met, things that we've celebrated, all the different life, events, friends that we've said goodbye to, we've lost. Just, it's been an incredible journey.
Exactly.
We've got another 20 years of this thing going.
15 and a half for me. You've probably got 20, 30 more years to go, youngster.
I'm not going to mention that. I would never mention that. But anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us. Anyone who's ever out there on the 787 at United, go up front. If you hear the old Irish barogue,
there you go.
It could possibly be Kieran Geehan flying you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for everyone taking the time to listen. And we'll see you next time.